Hi, this is Scott Wilkinson, host of Home Theater Geeks. In episode 276, I chat with Rikki Farr about his incredible career as a music promoter and producer. So stay tuned.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Home Theater Geeks is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.
This is Home Theater Geeks with Scott Wilkinson, recorded October 8th, 2015. Episode 276, The Incredible Rikki Farr. This episode of Home Theater Geeks is brought to you by Corning Optical Cables. Corning's incredibly durable Thunderbolt and USB 3-point optical cables are longer, thinner, lighter, and stronger. Go to corning.com/twit and use the promo code TWIT to save up to $50 on USB 3-point optical cables. Hey there, Scott Wilkinson here, the Home Theater Geek and editor of avsforum.com. This week's guest geek is Rikki Farr, the chairman and chief creative officer of Riva Audio. And this fellow has had quite the career in the music industry, which we're going to be talking about today. Hey, Rikki, welcome to the show.
Scott, how are you?
Good, thank you.
You looked wonderful the other night at the luxury show. I thought you were a great addendum to the luxury.
Well, thank you very much. I only met Rikki last week, but we sat down at the Luxury Technology Show and had a wonderful conversation. I happen to have this particular episode of Home Theater Geeks free, and he graciously agreed to join me. So thank you so much for that.
Well, you're very welcome, and I must tell you, it's the first time in my life I've ever been called a geek, and it feels rather good.
Good, I'm so glad.
you were kind enough not to call me an old geek, because it was...
No. Well, if it applies to you, it applies to me as well.
Because on the day I met you, it was actually my 73rd birthday.
No kidding. Wow.
Yes.
Wow. Happy birthday to you. That's fantastic.
It was wonderful, yes. It was apropos that I was at the luxury show on my 73rd birthday with my wife, who, of course, tends to like a magpie, go towards things of luxury.
Very good, very good. Well, there was plenty of that there.
Oh boy, yeah.
Listen, before we get started, I just want to make sure everybody knows that those who are watching live at live.twit.tv or logged into the chat room there or at irc.twit.tv can post questions for Rikki as we go, and I will pass along as many as I can. So, when we met last week at the Luxury Technology Show, you told me the story of your father, and I'm sure there are plenty of stories. We could take the whole hour talking about that, but interestingly, the story of your father and how that got you sort of into the whole music business is quite fascinating. So why don't we start there?
Right. Well, you can't see it because I'm on this laptop, and over on the wall, actually, on the other side of my office, apart from some of the gracious awards I've been given, is a picture of my father in the ring in Yankee Stadium in 1937. Fighting Joe Louis for the world title. It was Joe Louis's first title fight. My father had fought Jim Braddock. Louis had beaten Braddock and taken away his title. And my father's fight with Louis in September of 1937 was the first title defense for Joe Louis. At any rate, it was a 15-round Donnybrook, and you can get it on YouTube if you go Tommy Farr or Joe Louis. And it actually has the full 15-round fight, and tremendous. And talking about fighting, in those days they were 3-ounce gloves, so it was very different from these fights we pay $160 to see on HBO channel or whatever. And the fighter has had his fight and is off at the discotheque in Vegas for the night afterwards. I think my father and Joe Louis for 3 days after were at home piddling blood. There were tough fights. Anyway, my father, who in many ways is not just my hero, and I see you've brought it up on there right now. My father's the guy on the right. He's the white guy.
Yeah.
So my father was very, very successful as a boxer, but he was, for me, much more successful as a husband to my mother and as a father to me as his son. And unfortunately, living in Anglo-Saxon England, my brother and I, being the son of the heavyweight champion after the war, I was born in 42. My brother was born 2 years later. Everybody wanted to put a notch in their belt by kicking in the pubs. They love Friday night. They don't feel they've had a good night unless they've had a punch up. And they were always looking to pick on my brother and I. And one particular night, and I won't go into too many details, but there was 5 taxi drivers having a pint before the late night shift, and they thought they'd have fun with the Farr brothers. And I don't know, something snapped in me, and I got too aggressive, for which I got into trouble. And it got into the national newspapers because my father was so famous, and it was like Tommy Farr Jr., blah, blah, blah. And my father, who was very understanding, and he said, look, Richard, as he called me, he says, Richard, I'm getting you a passport, and I'm going to give you £100, and I want you to go away and see some of the world and come back when you can control your emotions. And you're going to get this because I'm a boxing champion. You're going to get people wanting to contest you via me. And he said, you just have to learn how to deal with it. So I got a passport and I got £100. I went off to Sweden. Long story short, I got asked to leave from Sweden for silly reasons. And then they deported me to Denmark, where I got a job and unfortunately didn't have a work permit. So they deported me to Germany. And this was in September of 60. And I arrived at Grossebrød from the ferry from Denmark. And I had about 8 Deutschmarks to my name. And I thought, right, I can go down to the Seamen's Mission or the YMCA and sleep for the night. And I'll go and get myself a chili dog. And if you've ever been, and this was in Hamburg. And in most German cities, in the center of the city, they have these carts with like these little umbrellas where they sell these wonderful chili dogs and bratwurst and weisswurst. So I'm standing in a line of 3 or 4 people, and I'm waiting to order from the guy in front of me, I'm waiting to order my chili dog, and I suddenly hear this voice behind me go, oh, I know who you are. You're the boxer's boy. You were in trouble. I saw you in the newspapers. And I turn around and I'm going, here we go again. And he goes, hey, man, I'm John Lennon. I'm with the Beatles over at the Indra Club. And I'm like, okay. And I kind of took to him, and I bought my dog. He bought his, and we were munching it. And he says, come on over. So I went to the Indra Club, and this is when Stu and Pete were in the band. And actually Ringo was playing in the same club with Rory Storm and the Hurricanes. This is before Ringo had joined the Beatles. And I hadn't really known what I wanted to do in my life. I knew I was the son of a very famous man. I was doing very well at junior rugby. And I certainly wasn't going to be a boxer. I tried that and realized that I didn't have the temperament or the hunger for it. And I don't know why, just in that little sweaty Indra Club, I just fell in love with what I saw. I was listening to early Chuck Berry, Bo Diddley, just the British bands picking up on the American music, rock and roll music and R&B music, and interpreting in their way, Little Richard. All of those songs were being played. Plus I heard some songs I'd never heard before, which were obviously early Beatles songs. And John and Paul, and George actually was too young. In fact, George got into trouble and had to be deported because Bruno Grossemeiter, who was the club owner, the guys had agreed to go and play for the Star Club, and which was competition. So he got George deported in the end. This was slightly after I'd met with him, and got George deported because he was underage and shouldn't be playing in a club at the age of 16. At any rate, I went on down to Spain and to had some time in Spain and Portugal, and I can't remember exactly, but either I got in touch or my mother I'd given them my mother's address. My mother had got a telegram that the boys had got a show at, this was before the Cavern. They had a show at the Iron Door in Liverpool. And come on up and just let's get together again. So I actually hitchhiked on a coal steamer from Lisbon that was going to Liverpool, and I worked my passage shoveling coal on this thing, and got to Liverpool all looking like the chimney sweep, and met up with the guys. And what I'd fallen in love with at the Indira Club in September, this was now late November in Liverpool, which is cold and rainy. But I just went into this club and the heat and the music, and I'd found my cocaine. I'd found my
much healthier than cocaine too.
Well, we won't go there, but I'd found my drug of choice, and it was the music. And the boys were like, and they're just great. And they were all into the sort of the James Dean and the hair slicked back and the rolled up jeans and the leather jackets. And this was before they went back to Germany, because when they went back to Germany the second time, Astrid was the one who was responsible for the Beatle haircuts. And she and Klaus Vormann, in fact, Pete fell in love with Astrid. And that's when, and I think Paul, and that's how that whole thing got messed up. I know the story, but I'd rather you guys Google it. Any rate, so that's when Ringo joined the band, and that's when they were the Beatles as we know them today. Mm-hmm. And when I went there, they said, well, look, come on, Rick, you're a talker, you're a Welshman, you know how to get in and out of places. Come on, put some shows on, man. Come on, what's the game, rent some places.
You do a great Liverpool accent, by the way. It's wonderful.
Well, so I went around and like the Guildford Hall, the Hazelmere Hall, Portsmouth, Southsea, Brighton, the Pier, Corn Exchange, Bristol. I would rent them, and I would put up these giant yellow posters in black silkscreen posters saying, soon to be recording stars, the Beatles. Soon to be recording stars, the Beatles. Yeah. And Alexis Corner and Rhythm and Blues, US Rhythm and Blues from the USA with Alexis Corner, and it was 5 shillings or 7 shillings and sixpence, and we'd rent these town halls. And you have to remember is that after the war period, when everything was, before it was the swinging 60s just starting, people wanted color because they were so used to battle gray and battle green and, that whole misery that left from the Great War. People wanted color, and London was becoming the center for the swinging 60s, and it hadn't quite got there yet. But putting on these shows, people were just coming in droves. And I remember I had an Austin car, and because in those days you'd pay 5 shillings or 7 or sixpence, you'd pay with half a crown, which was quite a large coin and quite heavy. And this little car used to be going home like this, because it was so full of two and sixpences, and it really started to go very well. And we had no clue. There was no manual. There was no education for this. This was just by the seat of our pants. And
you as a sort of concert promoter or producer, yeah.
It just evolved, and from it actually I started to become, for those times, quite wealthy. All those half a crowns mounted up because I
weighed down your car, but counted to something.
Oh, I used to go into the Midland Bank with these big blue bags and put them on there on a Monday morning after Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights of shows, and they'd just shake their heads and they'd put them in this little machine and count them, and I was I used to pay the bands out in the 2 and sixpences.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah, we used to pay. And my deal with them was after my costs, which I showed them, and you had a rental agreement, I would go 50-50 with the bands. And if there was 2 bands, the headline band would get 75% of that 50, and the supporting band would get 25. And it was more than gas money. I mean, times I heard was like, I remember once hearing George say, "Oh, this is great. I can get that new Gibson guitar." I mean, it's it's you have to remember, and then afterwards we'd go to like the Green Man or the Black Boar on the M5, and who'd had a good night would all put the money in. We'd get the beans on toast and a mug of tea, and I know these are all legends today, but then we were just young guys and girls, Cilla Black and a few others, and we've just doing this thing that had no meter, but it started. I started to think, well, look, these halls are taking too much rental money. They're seeing there's a good source of income. So what happened all around England were these ballrooms, these NAFI ballrooms, which were for when the soldiers and the soldiers and the WAFI and the Wrens, the female soldiers, female Wrens who did, the female soldiering and what have you, not fighting, support work. They would have these ballrooms, these NAFI ballrooms, and every one of them had to sort of cater to about 1,500 people, 1,600 people. And they all had these lovely oak floors for ballroom dancing and the Glenn Miller and the music of that time, Tommy Dorsey, etc., young Frank Sinatra. And I went to I went to a broker and I said, can you go to the Army and let them know that Portsmouth, Southsea, Brighton, Guildford, Putney, Richmond, I want to rent those ballrooms on long-term leases. And they had no use for them other than they were storing some post-war stuff. So I got hold of these places and I got a crew of young guys, and we cleaned the floor so it was back to really cool wood, and we put pop art on the walls and the targets and the checkered flags, and we put the blue lights up, and we got some very rudimentary Dansette record players and put some Vox, Charlie Jennings Vox speakers up, and you couldn't get into places. I mean, I would do a Sunday afternoon record show just plunking 45 records on 2 Dansette record players, and with a little Revox microphone. And
my God, you were like an early DJ. This was like pre-DJ.
This was very early, and we would have a matinee on a Sunday afternoon for 2 shillings and 6pence, and 2,000 people would show up.
Wow.
And I was playing really early stuff, and then some of the early Wilson Pickett, I had Fingertips by Stevie Wonder, and all the very early stuff coming out of Motown and Stax and Chess. And, it was Aretha Franklin. We were playing really early, the young Supremes, the early Marvin Gaye, just really early Motown dance music, and you couldn't get in the place. It was, and then I put in football machines, and there was 4 of those, and you couldn't get on a football machine, and they just became entertainment centers born out of music. And then on Saturday night, I would have the live bands. And now you got to remember there were young bands coming up from like Newcastle or Sheffield, like Free, the Animals coming down from Newcastle. There was the Moody Blues coming from Birmingham. There were the Stones that were coming out of Richmond, and they were the house band at the Crawdaddy and the Rikki, my other place over there in Windsor there. And all these bands were playing. We used to have, for instance, Spencer Davis Group, who had this young, wonderful singer, Steve Winwood. And we used to have to sneak him in the back door because he was an underage to be in the ballroom.
Wow.
Sneak him. He'd sing and play the organ, and then he'd have to go out and sit in the van. So it just, and then from this, some of the bands were saying to me, well, they have a hit record, like the Moody Blues had Go Now. So now they wanted to play the large, the Odeons, the 4,000, 5,000 seaters. So I think, well, there's no sound systems for this. So I went to Charlie Watkins and I went to who owned WEM, and I said, let's build sound systems that has like 16 channel mixers and some systems for the stage so the artists can hear themselves. And we started developing what is now the infancy of the very sophisticated live touring systems that you see touring around the world with in-ear monitors and everything else. And that started
line array speakers and that sort of thing.
Absolutely. And that's how I founded Electrotech, which became really by osmosis became one of the top 3 production touring companies in the world. And I owned that. The other one was with the Clare brothers from the Clare brothers, Gene and Roy in Lidditz, Pennsylvania, and Rusty Boucher out of Dallas, Texas, which was Shoko. And between the 3 of us, we would pretty much handle the 90% of the world's touring artists. And because touring now became, Wham all of a sudden wanted to go to China, and Tom Petty had become very big in Australia and in Brazil, and it just became worldwide. And Deep Purple in Germany, and Supertramp in Germany, and Pink Floyd in France. I mean, it just became a world thing, and we adapted bit by bit to the demands of the public's need to hear more of this music and hear it in a more lifelike way, in a more realistic way. And then the lighting became more sophisticated. I remember when Shep Gordon and Joe Gannon came to me and said, I've got a big hit with Alice Cooper. I want to bring him to England, but I need 185 lights. 185 lights. I don't think there's 85 lights in the whole of England. So we went to the theaters and we removed some of the lights, and we got some of the Gilsons, the hand Gilsons, that could lift the lights up and run them through a dimmer rack. And it was very rudimentary, but sure enough, Alice Cooper had his lights. And people were talking about this like, oh my God, you should see this Alice Cooper. And I remind people now, when I did Queen, and Freddie Mercury had 1,480 lights. And 500 of them were all moving.
Oh, man.
I know.
I got a question in the chat room you might not know the answer to, but I'll ask it anyway. Lawn Dog is asking, I just looked up Alexis Corning and found this song named Whole Lotta Love on a 45 in 1970. Does that mean Led Zeppelin did not actually write the song we all know?
Well, there were 2 Whole Lotta Loves, just as like there were I'm a Lover, Not a Fighter. And in those days, if you, before they really tightened up on copyright, you could take a title and you could write your own music to it. The Whole Lot of Love that Led Zeppelin did, I'm not sure. They take credit for writing that. Both Jimmy and Robert, we call him Percy, Robert Plant. And, but Alexis came way before Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
Because, Alexis Corner and the Graham Bond Band, you had to remember, had Jack Bruce, they had Ginger Baker, Dick Hextall Smith, they had Long John Baldry and the Hoochie Coochie Men, who had a young harmonica player called Rod Stewart. So they were all fermenting in the stew of all the pub and the pub and club and theatre rock in England. And I have to tell you, it's a bit of a blur to me. And it's only when you remind me when Alexis and Alexis Corner was great, man, because he was playing Muddy Waters. In fact, I remember we had not Big Bill Bernsey, the Sonny Boy Williamson, and Alexis Corner and Lightning Slim all on one show.
Wow.
And they all got together. This was before you'd think of jamming and all the bands getting up jamming like you see at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They just all felt that they wanted to play together, and they all had ended up on the stage and just played. And the crowd they must have had 3 hours of music listening to what were the the founders of that music playing in this unlicensed, unbridled way. I mean, those are the times when I really wish there was a good recording system, live recording system, because there could be some great archives from those times.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's so many more stories for you to tell, and in particular, I want to hear about the Isle of Wight. You have some interesting stories there. But before I do, let me take this moment, this pause, if you will, because I hate to interrupt you, but I do really need to take a moment to thank our sponsor for this episode, which is Corning Optical Cables. Now, Corning has transformed the traditional USB and Thunderbolt cables from plain old copper to incredibly durable fiber optic speed demons. Whether you're into high-end video, photography, audio production, or computing, you want the best, most reliable cables out there. And this is it. It's the Corning Thunderbolt and USB 3-point optical cables. Now, what I'm showing you here is the USB cable, which is super flexible, super thin. You can even tie it in a knot, and it continues to work perfectly. Corning is known for fiber optics, of course, and when you think of fiber, you think of glass. And glass breaks, right? Yet Corning has figured out a way to make their USB and Thunderbolt cables super strong and flexible. So flexible, in fact, you can bend them, walk on them, even tie them in a knot, as I just demonstrated, and they will keep transmitting at top speed. And speaking of speed, Corning fiber optic cables provide incredible data rates of up to 20 gigabits per second for Thunderbolt and 5 gigabits per second for USB 3. No other cable comes close. Corning optical cables have exceptional cable runs of up to 60 meters, that's 200 feet, for Thunderbolt, and 50 meters, or 165 feet, for USB 3. Now you can declutter, move peripherals into another room, improve productivity, and increase security by putting expensive gear out of the way. Corning optical cables are longer, thinner, lighter, and stronger. In fact, they are 50% thinner and 80% lighter than traditional copper cables. Take advantage of this special deal for Twit viewers from Corning. Get $30 off the 30-meter and $50 off the 50-meter USB 3-point optical cables. And there's no limit. You can buy as many as you want. Go to corning.com/twit and use the offer code TWIT at checkout. And we thank Corning very much for their support of Home Theater Geeks. Okay, I'm talking with Rikki Farr about his amazing career in the music industry. In fact, I have a comment here from iPad 33421 who says, please tell Rikki that I'm a big fan of his, having seen the 1970 Isle of Wight DVD many times where he was the host and announcer of the show. So I know you've got a lot of stories to tell us from the Isle of Wight, and we have some, this is a big festival in 1970, was it?
There were 3 festivals. The very first one was actually, as a promoter, I was asked to go to the Isle of Wight to help to build a swimming pool for an orphanage, a children's home for orphan children. And we went and we had brought over Jefferson Airplane, Crazy World of Arthur Brown, The Move, and we raised enough money to build not only a swimming pool, but a little sports thing. The second year, we thought, well, let's do it ourselves. And Ray Fulk and myself flew to New York. As you know, Bob Dylan had a motorcycle accident and retired, and he was living up in Bethel, Woodstock. And I had an idea, and we took a shot of the beautiful Isle of Wight, which was the island of poets, Tennyson, etc. And we got the SRN hovercraft, and we came across the ocean and up the island, and we filmed it, and we had this, and we went to New York, and we waited. I waited for 3 days. It was like some sort of early Ingmar Bergman film. We were waiting in this hotel. Don't leave the room. And I felt like a diamond smuggler. And then eventually there was a knock on the door, and there was this guy in a golf jacket with a golf hat with his hair sticking out, and with his 2 guys with him. And he says, "Hey, Rikki, I'm Bob Dylan. Nice to meet you. Thank you for waiting." And I said, "Well, come on in." And we sat down and talked about him coming to the Island of Poets and bringing his music back live to the world. And he said, well, I don't know that I can. And I said, well, I don't think there's anything from any song that you've written that has the word can't associated to it. And that resonated with him. And he said, no, you're right, I can. He said, what would you think about if I brought the band and I played with the band? And the band was releasing The Big Pink, which was a beautiful album. And I said, we would love that. And he said, and I have some other friends like Richie Havens. And I said, beautiful, come on over. And we put on that festival. And that festival for me was I've had a few in my life, but that was one of the few events that I really cherish. It wasn't recorded. It wasn't filmed. That was part of the deal with Albert Grossman, who was Dylan's manager, that there'd be no cameras. All the Beatles were there. There was actually, the Beatles were thinking of playing. Their amps were on stage. There are a few photographs where you can see some of the Vox AC30 amps, but a certain lady just told a certain member of the Beatles that he shouldn't be playing live, and that all went to hell, and I won't forgive her for that.
I think we have one picture. I sent one picture of Joni Mitchell on stage, and I think you can see the Vox amps behind her.
Yes, no, this is Joni the next year. This is the next year, the following year.
Okay, my mistake.
This is the previous year. So anyway,
this is 1969 you're talking about now, right?
No, I'm talking the Isle of Wight that the gentleman's talking to, that he has the movie from. That was when was that? 72 or 71?
Well, he claims it's 1970.
70, of course. Jimi Hendrix, Jethro Tull. Yes, the Bob Dylan was 69, and that was the whole lineup was. It was an amazing lineup for that time. The 70 festival was a whole different story. But he's got the movie, but there's a couple of things, if you've got time, I can share with him.
Oh, absolutely.
That has never been told before, frankly.
Oh, please. But if you want to finish your thought about 1969, that's fine too. 69
was amazing. Bob and I became good friends, and that's why I did his audio and his lighting for many years when he went touring, as he tours now. I've retired from it, but he toured and we toured with him, and it was a great experience for us. We made some money. All the artists were paid. The crowd loved it. It was an overall success, musically, commercially, from a security point of view, from a health point of view. Everything just worked. For me, it was a true festival of peace, love, and friendship, and amazing music. And there were some amazing artists that came out of it that had not been heard over there, who just blossomed after that. Ravi Shankar. I'm trying to think of his name, the folk singer. Oh my God. He never
there are
played.
So many.
Yeah, but Tom Paxton.
There you go.
He'd never played to more than 400 or 500 people, and all of a sudden he's found 100,000 people, and they just wouldn't let him go. And Marsha Hunt, who had those terrible troubles with Mick Jagger refusing to admit to being the father of her daughter, she was up there and she sang so beautifully. And it was just the Moody Blues introduced Nights in White Satin. Joe Cocker came on and sang the first live rendition, Little Help from My Friends. The Who came on and did the first live performance ever of the Tommy Opera. So it was just, and then Bob Dylan came. And, I'll tell you a brief story, which will be interesting. George Harris and I went to the airport to pick up Bob, and we picked him up. And one of the things he said, we were sitting in George's car, and he says, they were going to drop me off in London and then go on down to George's house, past me. And Bob said, I'd like to go see Carnaby Street. So I said, Carnaby Street? Now, if you would think one thing, mini skirts, short haircuts, and Bob Dylan, it just didn't fit. So I said, you sure you want to go to see? And I had the Marquee Club and was involved with 3 clubs in that whole area. So I thought he was looking to see one of my clubs. And I said, okay. So he said, no, I want to go Carnaby Street. I want to go shopping. He said, I've heard so much about it. So anyway, here we are. We're in Carnaby Street. And he said, I want to buy a suit. Something bright. Well, I had a very, very good friend who owned a chain of stores that were very big in those days in the 60s, with all the bell bottoms and the beads and the jackets and the Afghan coats and all of that stuff.
I remember that look well. Yeah.
Yeah, you probably still got some in the cupboard there, Scott. So, in fact, so I took him to Take 6, and he picked out this white suit. And he's trying it on. They didn't have anything his size because he's quite a slim sort of a fellow. And he's getting them all, pinning it up. And he said, I'll take this one. And I'm looking at George, and he's sort of scratching his head, and we didn't say anything. And he said, no, I'll take that one. And then he went over and he picked out this lime green. And back in the day, remember the collars were these huge collars?
Yes, I do.
Right? And he picked out a satin lime green shirt. And I'm just thinking Desolation Row. I'm thinking Blowing in the Wind. I'm thinking Bob Dylan. This has got nothing to do with this guy that I know.
Right.
So anyway, he parceled it up. He went off to George's, and I went back home, and then I wended my way down to Isle of Wight before they came down there to start rehearsals for the show. I'd booked this beautiful old farm, Afton Farm, which had a classic old Elizabethan barn. It was huge. It was like 80 feet by 50 feet and about 30 feet tall. And it had been completely renovated, and wood floors, and it was just bathrooms. It was just beautiful. And that's where all the rehearsals took place. And my God, I wish I'd made some recordings in there with the Beatles and Dylan and the band and Steve Winwood and Eric Clapton and Rick Gretsch. I mean, all the artists were congregating because this became the new musical ashram for what was going on. Exactly. On at that time. So I was sort of flitting around, just being one of the festival producers, the producer with Ronnie and Ray Folk, and I had my hands full. But every time I went over there, I just heard this absolute amazing music just coming out of there. So anyway, it was time for Dylan to go on. The band played. They played for an hour. The crowd loved them. And then Al Aranowitz, who was Bob's personal friend and manager, stage production manager, I would call him, but more a friend. And I said, Al, it's time for him. And he said, he's not well. So I went down to the trailer, and Bob was trembling. He was literally trembling, shaking. And he just it had been a long time since he'd had the accident, and he'd had the motorcycle accident. And I just put my arms around him, and I held him. And I could feel him stop shaking. I said, man, you're going to be fine. You just be who you are. You're a poet on an island of poets. Just take your poetry out there. And he looked at me, and, he has that wry smile, and he said, thank you. And he got out of the trailer. And as he got out of the trailer, he put this jacket on, and it was the white jacket with the yellow shirt. And I led him on stage, and those 4 big Kliegel Super Brutes, those spotlights from, 500 yards away, those that were used for spotting planes.
Yeah, big giant ones.
Boom, yeah, boom, they hit the stage. And it was biblical. He knew exactly what he was doing, getting that suit and that shirt, because he was it looked like he was floating off the stage. It was, and I don't want to offend anybody, but it was Christ-like. He was just there, and everything was the band were all in the Canadians, lumberjack shirts and jeans and boots and
which is now back in fashion all this time later.
Yeah, I my wardrobe actually has come back in fashion 4 times in the last 4 decades. I've been so hip in the last 40 years. But I will tell you, he went out there and he knew exactly what he was doing. He was coming back to present himself to the world.
Mm.
And the fact that Albert Grossman didn't allow it to be filmed or even recorded, I still think is one of the great treasons. One of the great treasons of managers getting in the way of sharing something incredibly special.
Well, now it's interesting that you mentioned that, because Donnie in the chat room has put in a link to YouTube saying, here's footage of Dylan at the 1969 Isle of Wight Festival. So there is some footage. It does exist. Have you seen it?
Yes, it's bootlegged, and there are some recordings that are bootlegged. But if it had been done with a really like a 3-camera, 4-camera shoot,
yeah,
with a bird's eye camera, and we'd put in the Manor truck underneath with the Rupert Neve desk, and
good sound recording as well. Yeah.
Yes, if it had been done, I think it would be to this day one of the classicals, because it would have been a classic. And bootlegs are bootlegs, and they unto themselves are a subterranean world. And I feel for the artist doesn't get paid, but then when I look at some of these artists, they're so wealthy, they've been paid plenty. So, that's from the bootleg. Yeah, see the white suit.
Look at that! Look at that! Wow!
Look at that! And the green shirt. I mean, my goodness me!
You can't see the green in this black and white footage, but still.
You take my word for it. It's bright green, bright green. And
Rusty Bone says, must have been a very early iPhone.
Oh my goodness!
Somebody's funky movie camera, undoubtedly.
Yeah, and I've got a little.
Oh, you're getting a little verklempt.
I'm getting a little verklempt. Yeah, and look at him, and it was amazing.
Yeah.
Yes, that was a very special moment in my life. So, going to your listener to the 70 Isle of Wight, the success from that festival was self-evident. So how did we top that? And Chaz Chandler, who managed Jimi Hendrix, was a dear friend of mine, and Jimmy used one of my places to rehearse. And, I did some early stuff with Jimmy and the Experience. So all of the bands, The Who, you see, they started at Club Norique, and then they came to my marquee club. In fact, I gave The Who their first big theater show at the South Sea Ballroom. So it was we all knew one another, and it was growing. This festival thing was growing in the UK. In fact, Bill Graham, the rest his soul, the great American promoter, thought outdoor concerts were a travesty and shouldn't happen and never be done. Never be done. And of course, the next thing when I'm talking to Bill, he's doing Day on the Green at Oakland Stadium. So I think
he changed his tune.
Well, I think hypocrisy and money go hand in hand, So,
okay, all right.
No, and don't be wrong. Bill was a friend, and we had many great times together, and I loved that man. And he was often misread, but he did in a much grander way what I and a couple of others had done in the UK and Europe. He did for America. And when I was coming over as a producer for the bands, I was working with Bill. The roles were reversed because Bill was the promoter with the Fillmore East, the Fillmore West, etc. So, at any rate, going on to the Isle of Wight, the second Isle of Wight, we were a new culture generation. We were young men, and we had this long hair, and we were making some money, and we were part of a new society in a country that was incredibly still run by the colonels and the members of parliament and the aristocracy. If you want to think of the British, think of their beer. And if you want to think of the British as a culture, think of their beer. It's very little bit of scum at the bottom, frothy as hell at the top, and absolutely wonderful in the middle.
And so this is your metaphor for British society?
Yes, at that
in the 60s and the 70s.
You know, I'm American now. I'm American. I've lived here. I'm one of you guys. So what happened was we realized that was a chance to put on a huge event, but now we're hearing from airlines from all over the world that they've had requests for large bodies of people who want to fly to the next Isle of Wight festival. Australia, South Africa, France, all over the world, Israel. The people wanted to charter planes from Air Australia or whatever it is, Alitalia, charter planes to bring. So we suddenly realized this thing had become a worldwide phenomenon. And how were we going to put it on? And we found the most perfect site. And we went to the council and we said, we'd like to rent this site and put on the third Isle of Wight Festival. And we were very friendly with them up to now, and we'd done everything we'd said we would do, from cleaning the previous site to sewage to bringing huge amounts of money to the island, because the vendors, local vendors, we employed, I think, like 6,000 people on the Bob Dylan event.
Wow.
And all farmers, you know, the tents and the digging the toilets and the trenches and just the generators. We used everything on the island. We had to bring some things on the mainland, but we used everything on the island to support the festival. So it was a huge influx. So the people on the island wanted it badly, because all the little stores, the little sweet shops, the tuck shops, the post office, there was lines out the door. And it was peace and love. The kids were great. They were this whole hippie thing. Yes, there was some strange smelling smoke in the air and what have you. and a few of the police drug dogs had to be sent off for psychiatric care. It was just so lovely and peaceful. And people who would have been conservative and anti were completely for it. They would completely turned around. So we found this perfect site, and we had everything set up. We were going for it. We were starting to put the bill together, and all of a sudden we heard from Sir Mark Woodnut MP announced on the BBC that there would no longer be gatherings of young hippies and ne'er-do-wells.
Uh-oh.
Led by that dastardly communist, Rikki Farr. and his pack of long-haired perverts.
Oh, man.
If you met the Folk brothers, not one of them had his hair over his ears. Mm-hmm. But that's beside the point. Mm. And that they were going to put together the Night Assemblies Bill to stop having any assembly over a certain amount of people to go through the night and go for the next day. So, being my father's son, I said, no, you want to fight? You got one. And I went down to the Houses of Parliament and I got arrested, and it was on all of the front pages.
Wow.
And I thought, and then I found out that in North Wales, there was going to be a gathering of 55,000 Boy Scouts for the weekend, for what they call Baden-Powell weekend, Sir Baden-Powell weekend. So it's okay for these Boy Scouts to go and sit around the fire and sing Kumbaya and, you know, She's Coming Round the Mountain and what have you. And it's not all right for some kids who wear some slightly flared trousers to listen to Joni Mitchell singing about parking lots, or Jimi Hendrix asking, "Are you experienced?" or Jethro Tull talking about Aqualung, you know, or Miles Davis playing Bitches Brew. And so I went on TV every single day. My father was like, "What, Junior, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm going to put on this event, Father." They just can't, because they don't understand it. They can't stop it. this isn't right. So we protested, and it became quite serious. And there was one time they threatened to lock me up. Shut up or go and spend 20 days in Lewis prison. And I said, you can put me in Lewis prison, but you'll hear me from inside the prison. And listen, only me and the laundryman knew. I was so scared. But, I put on my father's front,
Yeah.
Anyway, the House Assembly's bill was knocked down, and we were given permission to go.
Whew. Wow.
Wow, yes. But then the dirty work started.
Uh-huh.
The politicians got hold of the Isle of Wight Council, where they would get their yearly whatever they needed from the government for this and this and this. And they said, that festival does not go on that site. We will choose the site. So I was called one Sunday night about 7 o'clock and asked to be at the Fulk brothers and myself to be at the Isle of Wight City Council building to meet some members of Her Majesty's government. And I thought, my goodness, what's this? So we go down there, and there's they've got the Land Rovers, so we get in them. And I'm not saying anything, because you say something and it's converted. So I said, let's not say anything. And we drove in these land, and we went over this farmland to Alfriston Hill, this huge hill, and in front of it, this very large field. And they said, this is where you're going to have your festival, and this is where we'll give you permission. And I knew right away what they were doing. I said, look, if we put this event on here, everybody will go up on that hill for free, and you will bankrupt the festival. And they looked at me with that sort of, that very typical British,
that haughty look,
haughty, chinless, aristocratic, nonsense. And looked down his nose. He said, well, you're just going to have to make do, aren't you?
Oh, man.
Now, I didn't have time. We didn't have time now to go. And they had told the farmer they would compensate him for anything, blah, blah, blah. Well, I got hold of the farmer, we talked, and he knew the other farmer from the previous place. And so we knew then that we had a huge, huge problem. And if your gentleman that called in earlier, he will have seen the problems with the people on the hill. It killed the festival financially. It killed me financially. It killed us all financially. But Jack McGraw from Screen Gems, Columbia, the great American, it was a great publishing house. And I knew Jack in London for bringing over Simon and Garfunkel and things like that. And he invited him for dinner. He said, Rikki, he said, I got to tell you something. What if we put together some money and you made a movie of this? Because I think you're going to have some problems. Now, I said, Jack, yes, but I got no money for a movie. He said, well, we'll do it. We got a great producer, Murray Lerner. We'll make it. Well, at this time, there had been an event down in the south of France in Marseille called Société de Humanité. It was a communist meeting, a big communist society meeting for music. And actually, I promoted with the Floyd and Supertramp and Sly and the Family Stone some events in France for that. And it's a wonderful event. But the Société de Humanité is the Communist Party side of the French political party. Mm-hmm. And quite, whether you believe in their politics or not, they're good people. They're whatever they believe. I can't tell you I agree with them, but they're just good people to work with. But out of that festival, there was this team of crazy guys with these red headbands who were shouting, Libre de musique, music should be free. Mm-hmm. Music should be free. And they destroyed the festival. And I remember the Yardbirds were playing, and Georgia Gomelsky, their manager, they had to flee for their lives and so on and so forth. So all of a sudden, as we're told we're on Afton and we're on the Hill, there's all these things going in the alternate press, like IT Times and things like that, the underground press, saying the French Maoists were coming to the Isle of Wight to destroy the festival. Now, we've booked these acts. We've taken all of our money. We've paid the deposits. I was waiting from a yes from Jimmy, and Jimmy was having some difficulties. And I was also waiting to hear from Bill Siddons, because Jimmy Morrison had some issues. He exposed himself down in Miami, and there was warrants for his arrest, and they were trying to get him exported back to America for trial. And he was living in Paris. And I mean, I could go on for hours and hours how this all came together. And and as I talk, I almost want to burst into tears, because it's a lot went into this. And I don't want you to feel that it was me. I was, shall we say, on the bow of the ship. But behind me was the Folk brothers, and a team of the kids from the Royal College of Art, and the people doing the artwork and coming with new styles of art for posters. And much of the stuff that now is regarded as that era was the great psychedelic art. The Dave Rose and the Rodney folks. I mean, some amazing young talents had a chance to express themselves, but we knew we were sailing headfirst into a force 10 storm. And we booked the acts, we built the stage, and tickets were dumb. We thought, oh my God. But ferry tickets, tens, hundreds of thousands of ferry tickets have been pre-booked.
What are ferry tickets? Oh, for the ferry boat. You have to take a ferry to go to the thing. Okay, yeah.
Right. And the ferries were sold out, and there were people now trying to charter boats. In fact, I got 2 steamboats, with the pedal boats, down from Scotland. From Scotland.
Oh, my God.
Fishermen from Ireland. It was like Dunkirk for rock and roll. and I tell you, Scott, we'd only sold 150,000 tickets, yet there were like over 400,000 tickets for ferries.
Wow.
So we knew that this underground press, the festival will be free, and you can watch it from the hill. And the government they were going, yeah. We've got him. And we just said, look, let's make the movie. Murray Lerner, but then Murray Lerner came to make a movie like Woodstock. Woodstock had just been. And he knew of the Woodstock movie. It hadn't come out yet, but he wanted to do one of those things and supersede it. And we really did the Niagara recording, and we really used a lot of cameras, and CBS and Jack McGraw, Screen Gems, Columbia got behind it. And we had helicopter, we had everything. I mean, it's nothing to do with me. I was just trying to get the bands on stage, and, I had marriage proposals, death threats. I mean, what can I tell you?
Man.
So we suddenly see that things were going wrong. They tore down the box office, and we had the young girls from the Lloyd's Bank who were cashing the tickets. These were young girls, college girls, and they were getting attacked, and it was just really getting out of hand. And these French Maoists were really bad, and I mean bad. Soho club owner bad. I know bad.
Yeah,
I know,
you do. I can tell.
and it was bad, and we didn't have the security for that. So I called the police in, and they said, "You're on your own here. We're here for drugs and crime, but why don't you call Securicor?" So I called Securicor, and whatever money we had left, they took it, just to come over and stop this thing turning into
a riot. How did you end up finally managing to get the concert going?
Well, if you've seen the movie, there's a time in the movie, and I know tough for Tommy Farr's son to say, but I was in tears. And there's a time in the movie when I go out and I realized that if this carries on, there's going to be mayhem. There's going to be death. There's going to be anarchy beyond. because there's a huge amount of people who wanted to see the music, who were loving it, and they were peaceful and wonderful. And there was the French Maoists, plus there was a whole selection of guys from the States who were in Europe to avoid the Vietnam War. And they had sort of taken on this persona of the anarchist. And they joined up with the French Maoists. And if you see the movie, I then let them on stage to talk. I said, if you want to talk to the people, don't send me Luger bullets in a Coca-Cola can and saying the next one's going through your head. That's cowardice.
Man.
Come on up here and talk to the audience. This is a musical event. And you can see in the movie, this guy gets up, makes a complete ass of himself. But there was another little guy that actually looks like, just like, he could be Charles Manson's twin. He has the swastika on his forehead. And I'd been down to see him in Desolation Row and said, look, I heard that you're planning some bad acid and stuff like that. Just don't do it. Don't do it. You know, don't get into something that, because you're on an island. And if you harm my people, I'm the son of the heavyweight boxer. I got connections to people who make it very difficult for you ever to get off this island. I had to threaten them.
Wow.
Because they were, they had axes. They had these axes, and they're walking around with these axes hanging from their belts from this leather. And it was pretty scary. And there was one time when he's on a bad trip and the police have got him because he crept up on the stage and he grabbed Joni Mitchell's mic and pulled it from her and actually chipped Joni's tooth.
Whoa!
It's a little chipped. And that's when she was just beautiful. She said, you know, when she did her thing about, I was in the desert with the Indians and there were tourists and some of the Indians were acting like tourists and some of the tourists were acting like Indians. But man, you guys are acting like tourists. Give us a break. Let me sing my songs. And the good people that were there, 90% of them all stood up. And and I knew at that time that I had to do something, because these guys weren't going to back off. And I could see the outlying like places for food out, because you got to remember, it was 1.5 miles long. I mean, I could see little specks in the distance, and that was the audience. And I could see them rocking the electrical towers, trying to get the electrical grids. And if they came down, my God, think about it. All those people bunched together, you know.
Now somebody in the chat room said that this was the largest musical festival concert gathering ever?
This to this day is still the largest gathering of humanity other than being under a military flag in the history of the world. 652,000 people.
We have a picture. We actually have a picture of the hillside that you were talking about earlier, and it's kind of has a picture of all these people. Look at that. My goodness.
Now you're going to make me cry. You know. And
sorry,
so
don't mean to.
You can see what the government had done. This hill ran all the way. This was 1.25 miles long. This field. I mean, it's absolutely vast. And let me just say this so that we understand, and that is a phenomenal picture, but this gives absolute veracity to what I've been telling you. The ferry ticket to go across one way was £2. To return,
which is a lot in those days.
Yes. The return ticket was £3.50.
Captive audience, I guess.
To see 4 days of music, and you've got the bill there. You can see who was on there. I mean, it unfortunately turned out to be the very last performance from Jim Morrison and of Jimi Hendrix. They both passed away in very few short weeks afterwards. That was one of the largest bills assembled. And what wasn't on the poster was all the free music in the tents outside, like Hawkwind, the Pink Fairies, the Pretty Things, all that other music that was, you know, Fairport Convention, all that music that was going on that we put in tents that was completely free. The whole festival was £2 and 7 shillings and sixpence and 75p. Free tent, free camping, free water, free everything,
Wow.
subsidized food cost.
And we had 650,000 people.
Yes, I was the mayor of a very large city for a week. And that's why I would never set myself up for any electoral votes other than a glass of wine and a loaf of bread.
We have some pictures of some of the artists that were there as well that I just wanted to make sure we showed here. I know we have Jimi Hendrix. There he is. I saw something recently. It might have been the Isle of Wight. I think I saw him. It was some sort of documentary. Might have been that movie. I saw it on TV a little while ago. It was really quite something. We also have Joni Mitchell. We saw that earlier.
Joni, yes, that's when. And she'd come from the piano. The piano's over here to your stage left, stage right. And that's when this little creep climbed up and grabbed hold, and we had to get him on the stage. Yeah, and she's a beautiful lady. She's an amazing. I love Joni.
Amazing. I think we have a picture of the Who as well.
Well, there you are. Yep.
Look at that.
Yeah, and look at Keith there. God bless him, man. I still have the necklace he gave me.
Wow.
One of the best men at his wedding. It just, yeah. You know, the only thing the Who ever said, given me talking to you now at this time in my life, the one line in one of their songs that I now realize I could never have agreed with, but I agreed with then, was "Hope I Die Before I Get Old." I mean, I am at 73, as happy as a man in his right mind, meeting and talking to people who have been on this journey in one form or the other, who either have participated or have been in the audience. And let me be very, very open to you, Scott. I owe everything to music, and it owes me nothing. I've had a life that I think most people would lose a limb for. It's I don't want to be over dramatic, but I love my life, and this is why it's brought me to do what I'm doing now, which is, trying to bring some honesty to that, back to that music. And
yes.
But in answer to the young man who called in about the Isle of Wight, there is a part in the Isle of Wight which is much, much publicized, and I've got so used to it now, it bounces off me like shower water. But there's a time when I went out and I really went after what Murray Lerner portrays as me at the audience, ranting at the audience.
Yeah, somebody in the chat room mentioned that, said they loved that part of the movie when with you, berating the audience for something.
I wasn't berating the audience. And in fact, if you look at the film and look at the editing, between that rant and then going to it, I'm in different clothes.
A little continuity problem there, eh?
Murray and I have not spoken since, because
no kidding. Wow.
He wanted to make so here's the thing. There was a wonderful priest, the local priest from the vicarage. There were a lot of people who had had bad trips, got ripped off, had no money, lost their money, whatever, were in bad shape and couldn't get home. There were some messages that I had to, unfortunately, because the only communication to that huge crowd was through me and the microphone. I had to be the voice of green tea, by the way, green tea. I promise. Can you smell?
No, but I'll take your word for it. And even if it's not, it's okay with me.
Well, you see, there's a little Scottish in all of us. Anyway. So I had to give out messages to bring two brothers to the back of the stage and a girl, where I had to advise them their parents had been killed in a plane crash.
Oh my God.
Car crash, and a girl's brother had died. I had some terrible things to have to say. When you've got 650,000 people on an island in a field for effectively 7 days, 4 days of actual live, the big stage music, you can imagine the things. I mean, we had to have certain food, certain religious foods. We had to have all sorts of things to cater to the complete dichotomy of that audience.
It's amazing. It's over twice the size of Woodstock.
Oh yes, absolutely. And you know, I never want to compare the two because they were very different. Woodstock had to deal with some very bad brown acid and a major rainstorm. We had to deal with anarchy and the Maoists. So that rent, so anyway, this priest had said to me, he's a wonderful gentleman, he said, look, we've raised some money from the islanders and we can help some of the people. Could you also, from the audience, try to raise some money so that we can help those people in need? So I had an idea. I said, okay, Father, I'd like you to come on and speak. But let me go on first and talk. So I said, look, I got a way to do two things. Have a bit of a cleanup and also help some of our brothers and sisters in need. Take your soda cans and put in pennies, any small change, anything you can, and they will come to the front of the stage, and the priest and his helpers from the local vicarage will make sure that gets to brothers and sisters who are in need so that they can leave this island with as good a memory as you all have from it. And all of a sudden there is cans of coming, unbelievable, down to the front of the stage, and they're taking and putting them in these tarpaulins, these tarpaulins, and taking them back. And I don't know what it was, but I know it was several hundreds of pounds that was able to help a lot of people. We didn't know that until later. But then I said, but please let me introduce you to the Father. And he came on stage, and he had one of those really soft voices that carried. You know, you know, some religious men have that
good
way.
For a preacher. Yeah, exactly.
Yes. And he talked to the people with such kindness and such respect. And then all of a sudden, I see in the front of the stage 20 or 30 of these Maoists and a couple of the anarchists. And I see one in particular spitting up onto the stage. And I saw some of it go on his cassock.
Wow.
And I let him finish. He looked down, and I went over beside him. And that's not in the film. And Murray has that and should have put it in the film. And I had on this buckskin jacket, and I took it and I wiped it off his cassock, and I looked at this guy, and I gave him a Tommy Farr look. The next round's on me. And the priest finished, and they left. And then I saw them going down there, grabbing those cans and tossing them. And I just went and said, right. And that's when I let them have it. Now, if you listen to the tape, the film, when I finish saying, and you can go to hell, and I walk away, you hear the crowd cheering. They're, yeah, we're with you, man. We're with you. I went backstage and I sat with everybody and I said, look, to all the bands, I said, guys, there's no more money going to be collected. They're just, this is going to get torn apart. This is a vicious war game going on here. We need to be bigger than this. And Ronnie and Ray said, well, we're broke. We're done. Rikki, all your money, I can't give it back to you. I said, listen, for what could happen here, money is not the issue. And I went out and I took the mic and I said to the audience, I said, hold on a minute. Can you all settle down? All you crazy guys, just put down your anger. I want to tell you something. There's no way we can come out of this. So you say music should be free. A lot of the artists haven't been paid, so some of the music is free. But this event must continue, and there must be civility, and we cannot have a small pocket of violence that is so disrupting everyone else. That won't work. Because if this giant crowd suddenly stands up and said enough, who knows what's going to happen? And I could feel that happening. So I said, and this is in the film, I said, for all of you that want to go out, please go out. For all of you on the hill, whatever, come in. But for God's sake, just let's have some music. And then I played Amazing Grace. And while
you yourself played it?
No.
Oh.
No. I couldn't even whistle it.
Right? Oh, okay. All right.
So Jeff Dexter, the disc jockey, played it.
I see.
And they started to play it. And I looked at Jeff Dexter and I said, hold. I said, from you in the furthest back, who I don't know you, can't see you, and will probably never meet you, please create the largest chain in humanity and all join hands as one. Please, I'm just trying to think what will stop this agitation, this train careering towards this wall.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, please all hold hands as one. Let us be as one. And everybody held hands. And I said, now hold them in the air. And it's in the movie. And that's when, unfortunately, it was too emotional for me. I started to cry because I saw what was potentially a huge disaster, the power of humanity just touching skin to skin, people from all over the world holding their hands up. And I just told them I loved them and go in peace. I had to go because I was all soppy and silly. and as I said thank you to them, they stood, as you'll see in the film, they stood for 10 minutes giving the peace sign. And from that moment on, the anarchists, the Maoists, they'd lost their wheels. They'd lost their wheels. They were running around, we won. But what have you won? We've got music, and we've got amazing music. And that's why we were there. And we finished the festival, but the end of that film, you'll see that they say to me, and the weather was perfect. And so certain things happened, and that's another story. Maybe we can talk another time, but so many things happened that were so wonderful and just so out of the great universe.
Yeah.
Well, tell me that I was blessed and still alive. But at the end of the interview, Murray Lerner comes up to me and on film, and he says, will there be another one of these? And I didn't know it at the time, but the festival and the dust, the rain started coming. It calmed the ground. It started to clean the ground. I'm sitting there in an Afghan coat with a hood, and I just looked in the camera and I said, there will never be another event as large as this ever in the history of mankind. And I don't know why I said it. I did not have the right to say it. It was a very pompous thing to say. But since 1970 to 2015, there has never been an event. And I've done a bigger event. I did Pepsi-Cola in Brazil and on New Year's Eve, Ipanema and Copacabana Beach for Pepsi-Cola with Rod and Tina. That was 1 million people. I did the Pope in Ireland for 1 million people. But there's never been, for 7 days, that sort of gathering, 652,000. So that rant was at those fools who, incidentally, Jean Guillot, he's retired now, who was a Maoist and music should be free, ended up being a senior director of one of the largest car companies in France. Did we not mention the hypocrisy of money?
The hypocrisy of money. Well, this, in fact, brings up a question that Creamy Corncob asked in the chat room some time ago, which is, how do you feel about music piracy and today's music landscape in terms of money compared to then?
Well, it's to quote the Floyd, it's the dark side of the moon. I mean, it's you've I think the artists that will catalog, and some CDs are still being sold, ASCAP, BMI they have got a huge conundrum in dealing with if you write a beautiful song and it's been played, downloaded and been played, and if you consider in the first 6 months of this year, 1,480,000,000 people have downloaded a song.
Over a trillion? Well, it can't be a trillion people. There's only 7 billion people in the world.
Songs.
Oh, songs.
Songs.
Over a trillion songs have been downloaded.
Downloaded. And this, I can actually get my associate to send you that information. Mm-hmm. The amount of music and download streams that are going on in cars, in home, in earphones, and it is just, this is not the right words, but it's a musical plague. It's streaming has become, and artists, how they get compensated. I mean, Apple is really becoming the record company of the world.
Mm-hmm. Although they don't actually record music, they distribute it.
They distribute it. So artists will record it. It's going to become more and more where the artist records their own music and pays for it. Mm-hmm. Record labels as such are really going to be, they're going to be vessels. They're going to be like wombs. They will carry the child for a certain period and then hand the child over to the streaming world. The way the artist is going to make their money is that they're going to have not just a writing and recording craft, but they're going to have the craft of live performance, because live performance is where an artist can make a lot of money.
Yes, actually, somebody here, Dr. Morbius in the chat room, said exactly that thing. Artists make a lot of money from concerts now. And it makes me think also of how, it used to be live concerts were what you got, and then they were there to support the recording, and then the recordings more became, the concerts became more sort of to promote the recordings. Yep. And so the relative importance of live performance versus recording seems to have shifted over the decades.
Well, it has, and there were a few exceptions, and some of the milestone artists were like Bruce Springsteen. Before he had a really big record, was drawing huge crowds. And I went to see Bruce up at the Stone Pony in New Jersey, and Southside Johnny and the Asbury Dukes. I mean, and Bruce could go anywhere on the Eastern Seaboard, and he would even work into the Midwest, and he could play. And just on the word, and it was like the High Numbers, who became the Who. They were drawing crowds before they ever released Anyway, Anywhere, Anyhow. I had the Beatles, soon to be recording artists, selling 600, 700, 800 people on a Friday night at the Guildford Hall or Hazelmere Town Hall. It was just this desire for people to listen to something that, and then those songs. I mean, I remember just a sound check at the Kimball's Ballroom, who my house band was free. And I heard them writing All Right Now and, Wishing Well. I heard them writing them and doing the chord changes with Koss, God bless his soul, another one who's not with us. But Paul Kossoff, I heard those songs being made. I used to have my famous old warehouse in Marshalsea Road, and the Pink Floyd used to rehearse there and sleep a lot there because they would rehearse into the wee hours of the morning. Mm-hmm. Supertramp, so many bands used to use and it was an old corn warehouse, solid brick, right on the side of the Thames. The Thames flew by. In fact, the water from the Thames was used for the giant elevator because it would lift the big corn bales up to the different floors.
Wow.
And then you could see Wem Watkins and Marshall amps and all stuff. And people pulling on the rope to make sure it exactly hit the floor, hit the floor. And I was there and I heard that music being born.
That's incredible.
And it brought me to where I am in my life now. People are saying, and when I met you at the Luxury Show, and you said, well, what are you doing at the Luxury Show? Well, I wasn't quite sure myself, frankly, other than I had heard, I'm hearing this music being played through these little boxes. And frankly, with very few exceptions, it's horrible. It is a complete bastardization of the beauty, the nuance, the truth, the dynamics, and what I'd heard of that music, both live and and on the record. Now, I could either shut up and do nothing about it. And I think you figured out by now that I'm not a shut up type.
You're not going to do that. No, I wouldn't think so.
And and there's so many people like yourself and the people who are listening in who love that music, and it means something to them. And it could be one track, it could be an album, it could be a series of music that at a certain time in their life was very important to them. And I was there, in a sense, as P.T. Barnum, bringing it along, putting it in the tent. Come in, see the show. I will be damned. And don't forget, I also owned one of the largest audio touring companies in the world, Electrotech. Mm-hmm. So I was producing their sound. You know, I'd had, in the high season, in the summer, I'd have as many as 40 concerts a week in 8 countries of the world, 9 countries of the world, everything from Neil Diamond to Barbra Streisand to Ozzy Osbourne to Metallica to Rod Stewart to Tom Petty to Nirvana to Lollapalooza. I had all those tours going, Bob Seger, on and on and on. And I'm going to be damned if I'm going to have this new, my grandson, I'm sitting there with my daughter and she's playing the music. I said, what are you playing through? And she said, and I'm not going to mention the brand, I'm going to say, that's not right, darling. And then my grandson come in, the light of my life. And he's got this little box and he's playing it to me. And it sounds, the bass sounds like an elephant's fart. And the rest of it sounds like a mouse's fart. It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. Where's the nuance? I mean, you know, look, Brian Bromberg, who is one of the great jazz bass players, he's, you know, don't forget I played with Weather Report and Jaco Pastorius. And the bass is this 90 cycle thump, 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 thump. Mm-hmm. That's not bass. Bass is dum, 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 dum. It's a note. It's a tone. It's a cadence. It's beautiful. It's a skill. Don't take it out of this little box and go thump, thump, thump. I don't buy it. And a voice, when you hear, you know, you can hear even the early Sinatra recordings. You can hear the epiglottis. You can hear the spit in his mouth. And, you know, New York, New York, not New York, New York, New York, New York. I mean, you know, feel it. That's how it was recorded. And the great Bernie Grundens who took them and they mastered those things exquisitely. And a whole generation of kids is growing up listening to a highly constipated version of the beauty of the original. Mm-hmm. So I put together, you know, you can imagine in my life I've met a lot of people from talent, creative, directive, wealth. And I put together a team and I said, look, I think we should do this. If this is my last at bat, I want to do this. I want to bring about products, not the audiophile 15, 10, 20 thousands of dollars that are out of the reach of the majority of the people in the world. And God bless those people who do support that. But how can we bring at least 75% of that music in a very affordable, nuanced way, embracing the lifestyle that exists now with mobile audio, personal audio? Mm-hmm. How can we bring that about? And I got together some of the real bright guys that I knew and have met, some scientists, some really good acousticians, and I started my company ADX, and it's a highfalutin name. It's Audio Design Experts, and everybody who works there is an audio design expert, but they also have to have one other thing. They have to have a burning fire and a passion in themselves for the love of the music. And
I like this philosophy, man. This is really good.
It's the only philosophy for me. I don't give a fiddler's fart for these nasty little things that and you don't hear the song. You hear a facsimile of it. It's like you're listening 3 doors away hey, listen, I'm hearing this great song. No, now hear it. Listen to some early stuff that Peter Gabriel did. Listen to some of the real early music, and it doesn't have to be the legends. Listen to some of the work Nick Drake did. Go and listen to the modern jazz quartet that has been
one of my favorites. One of my favorites.
Absolutely. And hear Connie K. Percy Heath, Milt Jackson. Just feel the vibes being hit, and ding, not bing.
Yeah.
Like it's, hear it and feel like you're sitting in this wonderful club and enjoying it. So we set about to do it, and you saw the interest at the luxury show.
This luxury technology show is where I met you, and you were at the Riva Audio booth. Riva Audio being, I guess, a subsidiary or a part of ADX.
ADX was formed to bring together the team, the tribe, to bring together the tribe. And in doing so, because of who we were, we've been able to design and create for some very well-known brands, which I'm not allowed to discuss and won't, but very large. But we've been able to design some things which really is sort of meat and potatoes and wonderful bread and butter for us. But the goal, the middle of the target, is to bring to tens of thousands of people the honesty and the beauty of the music as it and if it was recorded badly and it's only at 24 volts headroom, then that's how you're going to listen to it. We're not going to compress it so it all comes out like one long damn sausage. It's
that modern music is so much like that. The modern recordings are compressed to within an inch of their life. We've talked about that on the show before, certainly. But we don't have a lot of time left, unfortunately, because another show is going to start. But before we go, I want to make sure everyone understands that what you came up with from a company that I guess is related to ADX called Riva Audio is this little portable speaker. We have a picture of that, the Riva products that are these little portable speakers. And I have the pleasure of having one now, and I've listened to it, and it's quite remarkable for the size of it. It's really something special. So I want to thank you. There is the picture of it. You have two models, a larger one and a smaller one, basically. The bigger one's called the Turbo, I believe, or Turbo X.
Turbo X, yes.
And the smaller one
is the Riva S, and that will be on the market in 3 weeks. And let me say, Scott, I didn't come on here. Riva is one of the great joys to me, and one of the reasons I wanted to come and share some time with you and your guests is because my faith in music and the faith in people who truly are honorable to it is given that I started this little company. And yes, the people that build that box also build the iPhone 6. I've got the right people doing the right job. We're not, that battery in there 26 hours, that's in the Tesla car. We're doing this properly. And the speakers in there, that the neodymium, the borium content in that magnet is at 91%. There's no other speaker in the world that has that. So the magnetic flux of that speaker, when you're so blown away, why does that little box make that sound? Is because it's, as the Irish say, it's in the details. It's all in the details. It's in the details. It's in the and I'll have another point of Guinness. But the thing is, right? But I love coming on and chatting with you and feeling, all of the names of the people that are around you in this, because you turn on the TV, music isn't making war, music isn't killing, music isn't raping, pillaging, music isn't cynical, unless the writer is cynical.
Well, there is, I would argue, some cynical music, but that's because the writer was cynical.
To my point, but music can't hurt you. And now I see this New England Medical Journal paper that it is proven that music in hospital rooms speeds recovery. Children that have music near the womb played when the mother is in pregnancy, that the birthing is easier. Music has, I believe, I don't want to overstate it, but I think it has medicinal purposes.
I absolutely agree with you.
I have sat at home and I've smoked a real good one and I've listened to certain music, and it's just like it's my Technicolor dream. And I'm a 73-year-old goat who just has worked his ass on to make sure that that truth be kept. And I'm having another innings. I'm having an innings, and my father went 15 rounds with Joe Louis, and I'm going to go 15 rounds with this. And people are going to hear, those who want it, I am going to bring over the next coming years at prices that people can afford, a way for those people to listen to their music in a truthful and honest way. And once this company reaches a certain point in its financial life, there is going to be a percentage of this company that is going to collect up all of those instruments that are sitting in garages and roofs and attics and pawn shops that are going to be all renovated and given to young kids, so that when I'm long in the ground, there will be another Stevie Wonder. There will be another Ornette Coleman. There'll be another Percy Heath. There will be another Jimmy Page. There'll be another Jeff Beck. There will be another Segovia. And
wow.
if we can put instruments into the hands of children that instead of going out and selling drugs can take out and put their feelings through their instrument and their words through music, what better legacy for all of us to do than to do that?
I can't imagine a better legacy. That is incredible. That's just an amazing thing, that once you reach a certain point, you're going to start giving back to and getting the next generation going with music. That's just remarkable. I want to tell you here, we have to come to an end. I'm very sorry to say, but the chat room is telling me more than once to tell you how incredible this has been and how wonderful your stories are and how much love there is in the chat room for what you do. Thank you so very much.
Well, as a Welshman, to all of you, Shemaima Beth, my love. Great love.
Well, thank you so much for spending time and extra time with us today. This has been an extra special long edition of Home Theater Geeks, talking with Rikki Farr, a legendary concert promoter, producer, live sound entrepreneur, and most recently maker of affordable portable speakers that actually retain and preserve and reproduce some of the nuance in the music that is so important to Rikki and to me and to so many other people around the world. I salute you, sir. Thank you so much for being here. So you want to find out more about Riva Audio and the Turbo X and the other products that Rikki and his team are working on, you can certainly find out much more at rivaaudio.com. You can always find me at avsforum.com. You can email me at scott@twit.tv, and you can follow me on Twitter at htgeekscott and at avsforum. You can always find previous episodes of Home Theater Geeks right here at twit.tv/htg and on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/twit Home Theater Geeks. Next week, I will be at the CEDIA Expo Convention in Dallas, Texas. So I'm pre-recording the show for next Thursday when I will be in Dallas. I'll be recording actually tomorrow, Friday, October 9th, and my guest geek will be the renowned calibrator Dave Abrams, and we will be talking about video calibration in the age of UHD and HDR. And WCG, for those of you who follow all the alphabet soup. So I do hope you will join me for that. Until then, geek out.